Всім добрий вечір.
On behalf of the brave.
On behalf of every father and every mother.
Wings for freedom. On behalf of our warriors.
And paves the way for a new history.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tochnyi Weekly. We're going to start putting a little delay on the introduction just because we're doing like a live stream and we thought it might be a good idea to let people file in. So this is maybe more of like a little informal bit that we're going to start doing just before we start the show, I guess. So mainly right now, I'm just going to say hi to chat. Hi to the panel. Hello, Erlend.
Hello.
Hello, Maurice. Hello, German Aid to Ukraine.
Yeah, hello. Sorry, I had to rush back to the computer because I was in the kitchen.
Sorry, everyone. I know you guys are used to not having to do anything right now. It's just usually
no worries, man.
Hello, Mr. Bionade.
Wish you a very fruitful evening.
Hello, Colby. You there, bud?
I'm here. Hello, everybody.
How are things, Mr. Colby? We haven't talked to you in a little while. Do you have any articles you're working on right now?
I just had a new one come out in the last week, was it? Was about Ukrainian air defenses and long-range fires. So the usual stuff I'm typically writing about.
Cool. Okay, we'll talk to you about that during the stream. That's a good thing to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. We can talk about that. I have a piece on new air defense system that Kongsberg unveiled earlier in the summer as well, which I put up on Defense Archive. So happy to talk about that or take questions about that as well later on.
Cool. I think you're also probably our foremost F-16 expert, which is a bit scary, but that's where we're at. So
I'll try not to embarrass myself and embarrass Tochnyi in the absence of John to correct everything that I say that's wrong. So I'll do my best.
I know how you feel. A feeling I know all too well.
But
okay,
Joseph, let's remind the audience that we really would like your help to promote our stream because Twitter has done some nasty stuff towards us, so we won't be going live on Twitter automatically like we used to, which is over time I think it's fine. I think it will push people towards our channel on YouTube, and that's probably good for us in the long run. But
Twitter shook us down and they said you either get a blue check, you pay up, or no stream for you, no content for our social media platform for us.
Yeah. And since we don't really have a budget and we don't want to spend our money on Musk, then we dropped out of that option. We didn't go for the blue check mark thing. So yeah, if people promote us, share us wherever you feel like it's convenient, then we would be very grateful.
Yeah, thank you, Erlend. That was a wonderful speech as part of my job during the pre-intro to do that, and I didn't. So thanks for doing that. And yeah, as Erlend said, we sort of came from Twitter. Those in YouTube land might not know. So it's we had a pretty decent following there, but it's difficult to talk about Ukraine there, especially to support Ukraine. So and it was difficult for us to do some of the content we wanted to do on Twitter. So we started going to YouTube as like a different way. One of the main things was we just like chat. We like the idea of having a chat where people could interact with us. So we love YouTube. We love the audience on YouTube. It looks like we got a lot of traffic from Twitter, just like people seeing we were live on Twitter and then coming to YouTube. So as Erlend said, us not broadcasting on Twitter kind of sucks, even though it wasn't like our primary focus. And if people could like promote us on YouTube, so that people come watch us on YouTube, and to just promote us on your social media in general, it really would help spread the word. Because I don't know, all my colleagues at Tochnyi do great research, and we just do our best to get all that stuff out there. So anything else, Erlend, before we start?
Well, we're probably, what we're worst at is self-promotion. We're not doing a good enough job on promoting our own content. We should probably work on that. But yeah, that's one of our main defects. But yeah, I think we can go ahead. People join, so.
Great. Well, thanks everyone, and we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome to Tochnyi Weekly. This is our weekly broadcast where we discuss the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine, and we have a good broadcast lined up for you. First, I'm going to cover the main news that happened all around the world concerning Ukraine, and then I will turn it over to German Aid to Ukraine for his weekly report, and we'll conclude we'll conclude our prepared segments with discussion from Bionade. He's prepared about the current state of the Russian economy. Then we'll probably move over to a little bit more of a Q&A. We'll talk to Colby maybe about some of his new articles. We'll talk a little bit about F-16s. I think everyone's kind of interested in that. And then we'll open it up to chat for a little Q&A. So without any further delay, I will go ahead and jump into the news. So we'll start with operational news, like we do every week. Ukrainian drones targeted a military airfield and oil depot in Russia, according to a defense source in Kyiv on Saturday. Ukrainian drones targeted the Morozovsk airfield in Rostov, which housed aircraft and guided bombs. They claim that drones successfully hit an aviation ammunition depot. The president of Ukraine stated that Russia launched over 600 guided air bombs in Ukraine in 1 week, and emphasized that these are the types of responses that this will cause. Russian officials did not comment on the alleged destruction of the airfield, but the local governor stated on Telegram that a state of emergency was declared in Morozovsk. He reported damage to windows and social facilities and industrial premises. The Ukrainian defense source also claimed that their forces hit a fuel warehouse in the Kamensky district in Rostov, following reports of a drone attack setting fire to oil tanks. Moscow didn't specifically address that, like that tank being exploded, but they said that 76 drones were launched by Kyiv in the Rostov region. And typically they exaggerate that figure, and like typically when the more they exaggerate, that means that they hit something, if that makes sense. Like, 76 drones, that means it explains why something hit, right? So usually that when they say something like that, that indicates it was a successful hit. But anyway, that's just a little bit of opining from me, a little editorial from me. So we'll move to the next strike. On last Sunday, so like a week ago, Ukrainian defense forces struck a Russian military equipment storage facility in Kursk. This is according to a Facebook post by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. The statement mentioned that the strike targeted the facility, and it noted the operation of enemy air defense systems and explosions at the target site. The attack was carried out by the Ukrainian Navy in collaboration with other branches of the Ukrainian military. And the General Staff indicated that they're verifying information about the attack, although I couldn't find any further information about it. And they also mentioned that they destroyed yet another oil depot in Kursk on July 30th. Russian-installed authorities in occupied Crimea also claimed that there was a missile strike in several locations on the peninsula on August 2nd, so 2 days ago. Mikhail Razvozhaev, the head of the occupation administration in Sevastopol, claimed that part of a rocket fell on the roof of a 9-story building. He stated that the high explosive part of the missile penetrated the roof but got stuck on the floor, and no residents were injured. The monitoring channel Crimean Wind suggested that the attack might have targeted a Russian air defense unit, and they shared satellite images and video footage to explain this. Fires were reported near Russian air defense positions in Balaklava on the outskirts of Sevastopol, along with burning debris and smoke rising from the 13th ship repair plant of the Black Sea Fleet in Kyiv Bay. And we'll learn a little more about why there might be smoke coming from there in a moment. They claim that fragments of U.S.-made missiles were found in Sevastopol after being intercepted. So, the Russian account is we intercepted everything. The Ukrainian account is that they hit they hit an air defense unit. The Ukrainians did. Ukraine's defense forces have struck the Russian Black Sea Fleet submarine, Rostov-on-Don, in the port of Sevastopol. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine confirmed the attack in a Facebook post. According to the post, the submarine was successfully hit in the port of Sevastopol and sank immediately after the strike. The Ukrainian forces also targeted an S-400 air defense system. So again, that's referring to the earlier strike. And again, I mentioned there was some smoke coming from a repair plant. So I should mention real quick, there was some confusion about this because there was a strike like the night before. The timeline doesn't make a lot of sense to people. And as best I can tell, what seems to have happened was Ukraine did a strike the night before and possibly damaged the submarine or something. And the submarine was going to be repaired, and they hit the submarine again and targeted it specifically and destroyed it definitively. That seems to be what happened, but there's a lot of dispute. Like basically there was an account of an attack the night before, and then an account of another attack, or another account of an attack, I'll put it that way. And that that was when the submarine was reported destroyed for sure. So there's a little bit of confusion about that I can't necessarily clear up. The Ukrainian Navy reports that Russia has 2 Caliber cruise missile carriers in the Black Sea, which right now are capable of launching a total of 8 missiles. And there's no enemy warship activity in the Sea of Azov. And in the Mediterranean Sea, Russia maintains two more vessels, which shouldn't be able to enter the Black Sea or get involved. So Russia's Navy not doing too great, but there's still a couple ships that Ukraine is targeting and destroying, and submarines. Ukraine's military intelligence completed a massive week-long cyber attack against Russia's financial institutions, telecommunications providers, and other targets on July 30th, according to a source in the agency. This is reported on July 31st. An extensive DDoS campaign began on July 23rd and disrupted the services of Russia's major banks, payment systems, social networks, messengers, government websites, and more. The Russian media widely covered the issues faced by users nationwide. One of the sources in the Russian media described it as one of the largest DDoS attacks on the Russian internet in history, noting that Ukraine obtained, this was a statement by Ukrainian intelligence that they obtained a massive volume of confidential data. I find that kind of a weird statement because a DDoS attack doesn't necessarily involve taking data, but I assume that other operations were involved in this attack. The targeted institutions included various, VTB, Alpha Bank, Gazprom Bank, and Sberbank, and Russia's central bank. So pretty much all the big banks. The source stated that all the targets were involved in supporting or financing Russia's armed aggression against Ukraine. And as of July 30th, 7 p.m. local time, targeted institutions had not yet fully restored services. And they hinted at future operations, saying that this is only a prelude to interesting events without providing any further details on that. Ukrainian special services have provided information and training to Tuareg rebels in Mali, particularly in drone operations, according to a report by the French outlet Le Monde on August 1st, citing a Tuareg commander and other sources. On July 27th, a group of Tuareg fighters, part of a coalition of anti-government groups in northern Mali, have claimed to have destroyed an entire column of the Malian army and Russian mercenaries. Following these reports, Telegram accounts linked to Wagner Group confirmed on July 29th the deaths of Wagner fighters in Mali. On August 1st, Tuareg fighters claimed to have killed 84 Wagner mercenaries in recent clashes. A rebel commander told Le Monde that Ukrainian special services have explored strategic cooperation with Tuareg soldiers. A spokesperson for the pro-independence coalition stated that they have links with the Ukrainians, and they have them with everyone else, including the French, Americans, and others. Andrei Yusov, which is a spokesperson for HUR, mentioned on July 29th during a television broadcast that they had cooperated with rebels in Mali. He stated that Tuareg soldiers received useful information, and that allowed them to carry out a successful military operation against Russian war criminals. Yusov didn't provide any details regarding the nature of this collaboration. According to Le Monde sources, some rebels have received training from Ukrainian forces on how to operate drones. Mali has been a focal point of a significant Russian influence campaign since the Malian army overthrew the government in a coup in 2021. The Wagner mercenary group was we all know about Wagner and Prigozhin and all the looting in Africa. Russia maintains a strong presence in African countries, supporting authoritarian governments, causing destabilization, and extracting resources to fund its war in Ukraine. So next topic is aid and economy, like direct military aid or economic aid and economy stuff. The Biden administration has announced a new security assistance package for Ukraine valued at $200 million using presidential drawdown authority, as reported by the Pentagon. The assistance includes air defense interceptors, munitions for rocket systems and artillery, and anti-tank weapons. Additionally, the Department of Defense announced a substantial support package using $1.5 billion from the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative funds. This package is designed to enhance Ukraine's air defenses and anti-tank capabilities, as well as provide funding to maintain equipment previously supplied by the U.S. Among the equipment to be delivered are munitions for NASAMS, ammunition for HIMARS, RIM-7 missiles for air defense, electronic warfare, air defense munitions, artillery rounds, mortar, and aerial ammunition. This marks the Biden administration's 20th USAI package and the 62nd tranche of equipment provided by the Department of Defense since 2021. Ukraine has received its first batch of F-16 fighter jets from the Netherlands, comprising 6 aircraft. A source informed the Times that these jets, intended to bolster Ukraine's air defense, have arrived from the Netherlands, with more expected soon from Denmark. Kyiv officially confirmed the information today in honor of Ukrainian Air Force Day in a ceremony which displayed the aircraft. Denmark has committed to supplying 19 total aircraft, and the Netherlands has pledged 24 total aircraft. Norway and Belgium also have said that they will contribute fighter jets to Ukraine. Just one thing I'll mention real quick was that it was unofficially confirmed by various sources inside the Ukrainian government by Western media that the F-16s had arrived. There was also some fake photos that were released that a lot of people went crazy over. And the Ukrainian official sources and accounts were kind of mad about this. They were basically saying, you need to wait for the official confirmation. And I think they just wanted everyone to wait for Ukrainian Air Force Day, which is today, and to have a big kind of unveiling ceremony. So luckily, this happened kind of, this morning and in my time, right before the broadcast. So it kind of all worked out, because I was kind of put in an awkward position where I had to be like, the Ukrainian government hasn't confirmed this, and they've said people should stop listening to the news about it. But they've confirmed everything now. Everything's fine. Everything's copacetic. So we're all very happy to see the great news that Ukraine has F-16s defending their airspace. Ukraine's Minister of Defense Rustam Umerov announced the launch of a second Ukrainian corvette, the Hetman Iman Vyhovsky, in Turkey. The ship built for Ukraine was launched at the RMK Marine Shipyard in Istanbul. Umerov stated on Twitter that Ukraine has already disrupted the dominance of the Russian fleet by destroying dozens of ships and is actively enhancing the capabilities of the Ukrainian Navy in the Black Sea. The first corvette began sea trials on May 29th. Due to Russian aggression, both the new corvettes were constructed in Turkey. According to Umerov, the vessels are equipped with modern weapons and will significantly strengthen Ukraine's naval fleet, which will improve the country's defense capabilities. The launch ceremony was attended by several dignitaries, including the commander of the naval forces, the owner of the Baykar company, which makes the Bayraktar, and also Erdogan's son-in-law, and the chairman of the Meclis, the parliament in Turkey, as well as Ukraine's First Lady, Olena Zelenska. The development is part of Ukraine's efforts to enhance its naval presence, and they, as mentioned, have already inflicted substantial damage on the Russian Navy without a navy. So I'd be pretty terrified if I was Russia that Ukraine is getting more ships. Romania has announced plans to co-develop the R-360 Neptune anti-ship missile with Ukraine to enhance control over the Black Sea after the war, as reported by a news agency called Army Recognition. This partnership is part of a trend of European countries collaborating with Ukraine on defense development. The R-360 Neptune is developed by Ukraine's Luke Design Bureau. It's a subsonic ground-launched cruise missile capable of targeting land and sea objectives that has a range of 400 kilometers. It was introduced into service with the Ukrainian Navy in 2021 and has been effectively used in the ongoing war, including the attack on the Russian cruiser Moskva in 2022, which sank the flagship of Russia's Black Sea Fleet. The Neptune missile system is comprised of mobile launchers, as well as transport reload vehicles, command and control vehicles, and special transport trucks. It's designed to operate 25 kilometers inland from the coast and can target naval vessels with a displacement of around 9,000 tons. Ukraine is currently working on extending the missile's range to 1,000 kilometers and increasing production volumes. In March, the Ukrainian military reported using a Neptune missile to disable the large landing ship Konstantin Olshansky, which Russia had seized from Ukraine in 2014 in Russian-occupied Crimea. An agreement was signed, a trade agreement was signed, like a free trade agreement was signed between Ukraine and Turkey. The agreement was signed on February 3rd, but the Turkish president approved it, and its annex is on August 1st of this year. The trade minister of Turkey announced that the bilateral trade volume between Turkey and Ukraine had reached 7.3 billion in 2023, and he emphasized that the free trade zone is expected to increase trade volumes to 10 billion by next year. Balad stated that Turkey and Ukraine will continue to enhance cooperation and increase mutual trade and investment based on shared interests. And he added that Turkish companies will participate in the Turkey-Ukraine Task Force for the Reconstruction of Ukraine, which was mutually signed in Istanbul in January. The Ukrainian Minister of Economy, Yulia Svirdenko, remarked that the completion of the trade agreement with Turkey will unite all Black Sea countries except Russia into a single economic space, which will provide mutual benefits for all participating nations. Ukraine plans to privatize a plant previously owned by Sergei Kalashnik, a Russian Federation Council senator. Kalashnik was sanctioned by Ukraine's National Security Defense Council in September 2022. According to Taras Melnichuk, a representative of Ukraine's cabinet of ministers in the Ukrainian parliament, the government has listed 100% of the authorized capital of Mortadetal Konotop as a major privatization target. So currently the government owns his assets. They're trying to sort of sell them to the private market. In August 2023, Ukraine's High Anti-Corruption Court upheld the Justice Ministry's claim to seize assets owned by him. Earlier this year, Ukraine completed the nationalization of the company, and the state property fund is the current owner. It's one of Europe's largest producers of cylinder liners for automotive, tractor, marine, diesel, and stationary internal combustion engines. And its facilities include advanced iron foundries, machining, and auxiliary workshops. On August 2nd, 2024, the S&P Global Ratings downgraded Ukraine's long-term and short-term foreign currency sovereign credit rating to SDSD from CC/C because the government failed to make a coupon payment on its 2026 Eurobond, which was due on August 1st, 2024. The agency noted that the government has decided to suspend payments on affected bonds prior to restructuring. Consequently, the government did not make payment on the bond, and they don't anticipate that payments will be made within the grace period of 10 business days. As a result, the S&P lowered the bond issue ratings for Ukraine to D from CC. However, it affirmed the CC ratings on Ukraine's other unsecured foreign currency debt issues. That's a little like too advanced for me in terms of what exactly it means, but I will say, as far as I understand, Ukraine was trying to restructure its debt before August 1st for this reason, because the payment would be due, and it appears that they were unable to do so fully. And so as a result, this happened. So, it's not like the end of the world or anything. It'll make it a little harder for Ukraine to take on new debt in the future. They'll probably have a higher rate, but I think that it was the result of Ukraine not being able to reach an agreement with creditors that would kind of delay this problem. And so, it is what it is. Ukraine's finance minister Serhiy Marchenko and World Bank regional director for Eastern Europe Bob Saum have signed an agreement for Ukraine to receive a grant of $3.9 billion from the United States for its state budget. The funds will be used for salaries of teachers, emergency services personnel, government employees, and support to key social expenditures, including assistance for internally displaced persons, low-income families, and people with disabilities. This grant marks the first tranche of direct budget support from the United States this year, with total planned financial aid reaching 7.8 for the current fiscal year. Marchenko expressed gratitude to the United States and the World Bank for their cooperation, and that it's crucial for maintaining stability in the country and in the country's finances. And they'll be distributed through the World Bank's Public Expenditures for Administrative Capacity Endurance Project, or it's called PEACE in Ukraine, the PEACE Fund. Mondelez International, the American company known for producing chocolate and cookies such as Oreo, Milka, Toblerone, Barney, and Took, has decided not to disclose its Russian business financial statements for 2023. The decision, also made by Nestle and Mars, highlights the efforts by consumer goods companies to avoid further reputational harm due to their continued presence in the Russian market. Despite facing a boycott and ongoing pressure from employees, activists, politicians, and investors to leave Russia, Mondelez has pledged to make its Russian operations, quote, stand alone with a self-sufficient supply chain by the end of last year. And the company has continued to expand its businesses in Russia. For example, Mondelez sold 9,800 tons of Milka chocolate in Russia during the first quarter of 2024, which is 6 times more than what was projected for the same period. The company's Russian subsidiary and employees remain integrated with the rest of the company. The Russian subsidiary still uses their planning systems and their logistics systems. Additionally, Russian employees continue to participate in work meetings with colleagues from other regions, according to Reuters, a Reuters source familiar with the matter, so presumably an anonymous company insider. Although Mondelez has classified its financial statements, estimates by the Kyiv School of Economics suggest the company's revenue in Russia for 2023 was around 1.4 billion, which is up from around 928 million in 2021 and 1.4 billion in 2022, so about the same. And that would result in about 62 million in taxes paid to the Russian government. And due to these activities, Ukraine's National Agency on Corruption Prevention has listed Mondelez as one of the international sponsors of war, which was last year, along with other giants such as Unilever, P&G, Mars, Nestle, and PepsiCo. China has revised its export controls on military drones in response to growing criticisms from the US and its allies regarding support for Russia's war efforts in Ukraine. The directive was issued after the government was visited by Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba, who visited China for the first time since the full-scale invasion in 2022. And on July 24th, Kuleba stated that China remains unshakably committed to Ukrainian sovereignty and territorial integrity. Several agencies, including the Central Military Commission, added drones with, quote, high-precision measurement equipment to a blacklist, according to Bloomberg. The updated list, originally published last year, will become effective on September 1st. While China claims neutrality in the Russia-Ukraine war, it has strengthened its ties with Moscow and supported Russia against Western sanctions. They become the primary source of dual-use goods for Russian defense industries. However, they've consistently denied Western allegations of supplying Moscow with dual-use items that have military applications. The Minister of Commerce lifted export bans on consumer-grade drones, but emphasized that civilian equipment should not be used for military purposes. European officials allege that Chinese and Russian companies are developing an attack drone similar to the Iranian Shahed model used in Ukraine. China has denied these claims, asserting that it's not providing weapons to any parties involved, and has strict export controls. And their Ministry of Commerce says that they oppose drone exports being used, blah blah blah. So yeah, China very, very vehemently denies this. I think we all know that both sides are using Chinese stuff in Ukraine. I think so far it seems like Ukraine's making a more honest effort to build their own capacity. And it looks like China is taking Western sanctions seriously and cracking down a bit. So it looks like that would all be to Ukraine's advantage. So you'll love to see it. Western sanctions have led to a reduction in the number of planes in Russia's airlines fleet. According to the Moscow Times, citing data from the Russian Federal Air Transport Agency, which is likely padding their numbers as best they can, the number of airliners in the fleets of Russia's 13 total largest airlines have decreased by 3%, from leaving a total of 693 aircraft. The Federal Transport Agency reported that 12 planes were out of service during that period, and 19 are currently in what they call conservation, and that 2 airlines lost 5 planes, and Aeroflot as well as UT Air lost 2 others. The main reason for the increased number of retired aircraft is the difficulty in maintaining and repairing foreign airliners due to sanctions. In 2023, Russian airlines transported 105 million passengers, which is a 10% increase from 2022, but 22% less than in 2019. This year, the expected passenger traffic is expected to decrease by 7%, which would be 98 million people. Despite sanctions preventing the delivery of Russian aircraft, recently a business jet named the Airbus A320neo, valued at around 115 million, arrived in Russia. To support its airline industry amid Western sanctions following the invasion, Russia has allocated 12 billion in government subsidies and loans to support their airline industry after critical equipment and maintenance services were cut off. Okay, next topic, a bit shorter, is international relations. The European Union has denied a request from Hungary and Slovakia for urgent talks regarding Ukraine's recent ban on the transit of crude oil owned by Russian supplier Lukoil. These two countries had been granted exemptions from the EU's ban on Russian oil imports after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and they sought EU intervention following Ukraine's decision last month to halt the transit of Lukoil products through the Druzhba pipeline across Ukraine. According to Bloomberg, the European Commission Vice President informed Hungary and Slovakia that Ukraine's sanctions would not affect transit operations through the Druzhba pipeline as long as Lukoil doesn't formally own the oil. They also mentioned that several EU member states had asked about alternative supply routes and questioned why Hungary and Slovakia had not considered other options. In a phone conversation with Ukrainian Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal, they addressed concerns about oil supply security raised by Hungary and Slovakia, and the European Commission stated there is no immediate threat to the oil supply for both countries, and they're waiting for more information from them before they make any decision as the European Commission. So, in other words, Hungary effectively demanded that the European Union start negotiations with Ukraine about this, and the European Union has sort of said, at least to bilaterally to Ukraine, we're not going to do anything. We're asking them for more information. But aside from that, we think this is all fine. Hungary has also stirred controversy within the European Union by allowing Russians and Belarusians to enter the country as guest workers without security checks. This is the only EU member maintaining ties with the Kremlin, and they've consistently opposed the EU's collective military support. This policy has raised concerns about potential security risks in the EU, including the possibility of Russian spies or other individuals with malicious intent entering the country. And the Hungarian government announced that in the spring it expects about 65,000 guest workers under the program, and they can bring their families and apply for permanent residency after 3 years. The approach contrasts very sharply with other countries like Finland's and Estonia and the Baltics, which have closed their borders to Russian citizens, citing security concerns. EU foreign policy expert Sergei Lagodinsky criticized the policy, stating that allowing entry without security checks while Russia is actively trying to undermine Europe is misguided. And he also said that we shouldn't generalize all Russian citizens, but that this particular program looks very flawed. Hungary's actions have further complicated its relations with the EU, and it also blocked the allocation of over 6 billion euros from the European Peace Facility funds military aid to Ukraine during a foreign ministers meeting on July 22nd, and they've received a lot of pressure to lift that blocking of aid. In response, Polish deputy foreign minister suggested that Orban should leave the EU and form an alliance with Putin, and this was followed from Orban's criticism of Poland's EU policies and their ties with Russia. In addition, after Orban's diplomatic visits to Russia and China, 63 members of the European Parliament called for suspending Hungary's EU voting rights, arguing that Orban's actions damage EU unity and misrepresent its authority. The MEPs, the members of European Parliament, criticized Orban's proposal for a Ukrainian ceasefire on Russian terms and his claims of representing the EU without an official mandate. Ravi Moon, a 22-year-old Indian citizen recruited into the Russian army, died in the war against Ukraine, according to an Indian press outlet on July 29th. This was cited by Moon's relatives. Russia's war against Ukraine has led to significant casualties for its military. It's a bit of an understatement. To reduce unpopular conscription among its domestic population, Moscow has been recruiting foreigners from countries such as Nepal, Somalia, India, and Cuba to fight in Ukraine. There have been several reports of Indian men traveling to Russia for work or tourism and being coerced into joining the war, with some losing their lives in battle. Moon is the 5th known Indian citizen to die in Russia's war in Ukraine while serving in the Russian forces, according to AFP. He traveled to Russia in January after a private employment agent promised him a job in the transportation sector, but he was induced into military conscription upon arrival. This is reported by his brother. Moon was deployed to the front line in March, and after that, he stopped responding to calls and messages, and his brother contacted the Indian embassy in Moscow, where he learned of his brother's death. The embassy requested the family send DNA samples to identify the body. In July, Moscow agreed to release all Indians serving in its armed forces and facilitate their return following a meeting between Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Russian President Vladimir Putin. That same month, Russian authorities began compensating the families of all Indian citizens who were recruited for the war and killed in action. The Indian Foreign Ministry later stated that the government has continued to work with the Kremlin to repatriate about 50 Indians currently fighting in the Russian army. And the last topic this week will be some stuff going on in Russia. Could practically call this section Russia is corrupt, but anyway. Police arrested politician Dmitry Savelyev outside Russia's Federation Council building on Friday after the upper chamber's lawmakers agreed to lift his senatorial immunity at the request of the general prosecutor of the case. He's suspected of hiring an associate, this is a Russian senator, to kill a businessman in August of 2023 due to a personal animosity, alleging to have been offered $100,000 for the murder. The plan reportedly involved using a former guard in Russia's federal penitentiary service as an intermediary, but the guard immediately alerted the federal security services. Officials then staged the killing, and Savelyev paid the reward, believing that the murder had already occurred. According to the newspaper Kommersant, the intended target was a business owner named Ionov, who supposedly embezzled money for their company. Savelyev claims that he's innocent and that the charges are fabricated. He's been a senator in the Russian Federation Council since 2016. He represents Russia's Tula region, with his term ending in September 2024. He's also a member of the United Russia's regional party, Presidium in Tula, in other words, Putin's party. Before joining the Federation Council, he served as a deputy for the State Duma for 17 years and worked as an executive in Lukoil, as well as the president of state-controlled oil pipeline company Transneft. So pretty important player in Russia, and a senator busted, apparently either trying to kill a guy or they're framing a Russian senator for political reasons. Either way, crazy. Russian authorities have also arrested Colonel Dmitry Peshkov, a former deputy commander of the 144th Motorized Rifle Division of the 20th Combined Arms Army of the Moscow Military District. This is a particularly prestigious unit, as far as I understand. TASS, which is a Kremlin-aligned Russian news outlet, reported that Russian authorities have detained Peshkov, accusing him of embezzling food rations intended for Russian soldiers in Ukraine. Who would want Russian food rations bad enough to steal them? Eludes me, but Peshkov has pleaded not guilty to the charges, and analysts have suggested that this arrest is likely part of a Kremlin strategy to remove senior officials from the Russian Ministry of Defense. This could be a way of indirectly holding commanders accountable for the failures of units or to ensure loyal and compliant officers politically. Recently, units of the 144th Motorized Rifle Division have been conducting offensive operations in Tochnyi in Donetsk Oblast with limited success, and they also lost some territory to Ukrainian counterattacks in these areas. In other words, seems like an interesting coincidence that, you know, the unit's doing bad. Either the unit's doing bad because they're corrupt, or because the unit's doing bad, they're being, given corruption charges. Vladimir Pavlov, the head of Russia's military clothing and food supplier Voentorg, was detained on fraud charges. This is reported on August 1st. Since April, several high-ranking military officials have been arrested on various charges, including bribery, abuse of power, and this is following the dismissal of the Russian Deputy Defense Minister, Timur Ivanov. Russia's Interior Ministry spokesperson stated that the general director was involved in a criminal conspiracy with others to sell toiletries to the military at inflated prices. The Russian law enforcement agencies think that they inflated prices by around $4.6 million through government contracts. According to the Moscow Times, citing the Russian Telegram channel MASH, drinking water and certain food items have been disappearing from the shelves of grocery stores in Yaroslavl, Ivanovo, and Kostroma districts of the Russian Federation. The Telegram channel reported that shortages of bread, grains, flour, and spices, as well as bottled drinking water, began last week. You guys might have seen some social media buzz about this, so I'm just trying to give you the backstory on it. Initially, these items were out of stock in stores, but the shortages have since spread to other cities. The reason for the shortages is reportedly due to issues in the X5 Group's distribution centers. These are the grocery store chains that operate mainly in these areas, which supply goods to the stores. There are about 1,000 workers short following anti-migrant raids that resulted in the deportation of many group workers from Russia. President Vladimir Putin has announced a signing bonus for the federal government of around 400,000 rubles, which is around 4,600 US dollars, for new army recruits who commit to military contracts of at least 1 year between August 1st and the end of 2024. The new bonus is more than double the previous bonus offered by the government to recruits joining in Ukraine. The presidential decree also suggests that senior regional officials should pay an additional bonus to residents who enlist. Enlistment bonuses from the regional governments have varied, but have recently been increasing. So in other words, whatever state you register from, the regional government might give you a specific bonus, and then there's a flat bonus from the entire federal government. As well, according to a joint investigation by a channel called the Conflict Intelligence Team, which was published on August 1st, Russia is likely inflating the actual number of new contract soldiers it is recruiting by around 1.5 times. The Russian Defense Ministry announced that there were 640,000 soldiers serving under contract. However, using data from Russian federal budget expenditures, it appears that there have only been 426,000 bonuses given out. And this leaves a discrepancy of around 200,000 soldiers, which can't be explained by variations in payments. The investigation also cited an anonymous source that claimed in some regions of Russia only about 50% of recruitment targets are being met. So that concludes my news for this week. So I will go ahead and turn it over to German Aid to Ukraine for his report. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Hello, guys. As always, I will now present the most important news from Germany regarding Ukraine. And we will start with the latest deliveries of German military aid, which were made public on Monday by the German government. In the past 3 weeks, Germany has supplied the following to Ukraine: 8 Leopard 1A5 main battle tanks, 10 Sonderbot 5 unmanned surface vessels, 2 Bergepanzer 2, went German for a little bit, armored recovery vehicles, 10 ground surveillance radars, Ground Observer 12, 21,000 35mm APDST rounds for the Gepard and Cheetah Sparks, and nearly 25,000 M92 combat helmets. And yeah, these are the famous German helmets. And on Wednesday, the Czech Ministry of Defense made public that they have agreed on another Ringtausch with Germany. Germany will once again supply 14 Leopard 2A4s and 1 Bergepanzer 3 to the Czech Republic. This serves as a compensation for material that the Czech Republic has already handed over to Ukraine. The pledged Leopard 2A4s are most likely part of the 25 Panzer 87 or Panzer 87 main battle tanks purchased in Switzerland, which cannot legally be handed over to Ukraine. And as the last item of this week, I have promised to Joseph that I will show you guys once a week an interesting image or a video of German supplied military equipment. And to start this little tradition, I wanted to share you the first footage released today, actually, by the Ukrainians of an Oerlikon revolver gun Mark III, which is part of the Skynex air defense system Germany has supplied 2 times to Ukraine. Like I said, it was video material just released today as part of the 20th anniversary of the Ukrainian Air Force. So yeah, that's all I had for you this week, and back to you, Joseph.
It's beautiful. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll next go over to Bionade, who has a report that he has prepared about the current state of the Russian economy. Over to you, sir.
Yes, thank you. As a small disclaimer, I'm not an economist, expert or something. Listen to many experts on YouTube and other platforms who are reporting on a regular basis about Russia's economy and the economy of other states and all the influences. And lately there were some news and some things happened. And I think I have the screen share on, if somewhere I could put my screen on. Yeah, okay. Let's go to a couple of headlines and talk a bit about what is it about and how is it related. Let's start with Russia's GDP is growing faster than all advanced economies, says the IMF. They're expecting a growth of 3.2% this year. And we see a little bit down further in the article. Where was it? Yeah. Okay, can't find it right now. The point is, most of the reasons for this spending is government spending, that Russia is basically dumping its money into the economy, which they saved, especially, like Joseph already mentioned, they are giving out big sign-up bonuses for the military and also putting it in defense spending. We will go further into this, but let's have a look at first at Russia's GDP, how it evolved in the last couple of years. You see early 90s, end of the 90s, was really down, early 2000s, slowly built up. The high point here, 2013, and then we all know what happened, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, sanctions, and yeah, we are a bit down here. Russia worked its way up in the last couple of years. Another invasion of Ukraine, and yeah, this is basically what's happens now with the GDP of Russia. So Russia's GDP is growing. It's predicted to grow further, possibly. But we can see it's not at the point it was 2013, right? Yeah, here we have the topic with the sign-up bonuses for the volunteers in Ukraine. Like Joseph already mentioned, there's a decree now that they will get 400,000 rubles as an upfront payment, which is, yeah, this money is immediately basically there. And new decrees raises the minimum annual wage in this first year of service to 3.2 million rubles. That's around 40,000 US dollars. These wages are very high, and in some regions of Russia, that's a wage for 4 to 5 years. So yeah, that's why poor people sign up for this often, and there are other problems arising out of this. You can imagine if people right now get a big bonus payment, dumping money into the economy, the prices are rising. There's more competition. Products are maybe not as fast deliverable because other people have the money and spend it now, right? Because Russia artificially dumps money into this. Here arises another problem because Russia needs men so badly. They are raising the sign-up bonuses, but also there's rising basically so badly. It's inflation. We have, where is it? Give me a second. Yeah. Yeah. Russia's military is hard up for manpower and pays so much that even the oil and gas sector have problems recruiting people. You would say like, oh, recruiting people, but Russia actually has a shortage of manpower. We already like had these experienced and heard these stories of Russia making easy recruitments in the last years and just taking maintenance workers, right, or people who work in the yeah, services of the city or the state, basically, right? These workers get conscripted. They get taken from their work directly, possibly to the conscription office or to the training wherever they go, right? And these people are missing. So everywhere are manpower shortages in Russia. And the civilian sector is now competing with the military sector for this manpower. That means the civilian sector starts also paying more. And yeah, when you have to pay more for your labor, obviously you need to raise the price for your products. And these are basically the effects. This whole conscription sign-up bonuses putting money in the Russian defense industry, ordering more defense material. This all makes it hard, not for the Russian state. It also makes it hard for the Russian state, but also hard for the civilian society, right? The whole Russian society will see more inflation like they already have. I think Russia's GDP is now at a 15 months high. And it's really will really have bad effects on the Russian society, because it gets harder to buy normal things. The prices are rising. Some people get paid more, some people not get paid more, but usually you try to have, for example, the inflation in Western nations around 2%. So you have a equal kind of inflation where everyone can adjust to, and it's not good if you have an inflation which is jumping up and jumping down, and in this sector the prices are high now, then in the other sector the prices are high. It really creates friction in areas you don't want to have friction. And not enough of this news. This is all what happens inside of Russia. Outside of Russia, there have been international news that China more or less said, because of the Western sanctions, it's harder to pay for Russia. We don't really want your ruble anymore. And Russia is now starting to try to trade with China via intermediaries. These intermediaries take up to 10% payments for themselves. It's getting more expensive. It's not so easy anymore. Chinese suppliers are not really sure if they get their money or get their money not from Russia in a timely manner. So this basically makes it all more and more complicated for Russia and the Russian society going through this phase. Some people are already speaking about this will develop further, and if Russia ever stops with the war or ever loses the war, the effects will be really seen, because at some point Russia cannot spend any more money and put it in their economy, and all these artificial money they dumped in, if this is not coming anymore, Russia will be really big in problems. Not now. Now the effects will be seen in some areas of the civil society, of the civil life, but for the long term, Russia will be in pain. Will not be a good life in Russia, but nobody is really expecting the Russian economy to break down in the near future. Yeah, that's basically the state, as far as I understood it, of the Russian economy right now. And we will see how it will develop further. But as we have seen in the news, there are not really prospects of Russia having any other economy than the war economy. And even in this war economy, there is now another point, which I wanted to speak about, and these are the Russian arms exports, which are plummeting. Before, Russia was like the second biggest exporter of weapons and seller of weapons internationally. I think now from 31 countries in 2019, it's down to 12 last year. And with the Western sanctions, it's also hard for Russia to build new weapons and also sell them. So even the sector where they're pumping in all their money is not doing good internationally. So
One thing I wanted to add is that I think it's interesting that the chief of their central bank had a press conference or press release just recently, where she stated that basically the Russian economy is overheated, and she said it's in the first state of cyclical overheating for 10 years. and she predicted that the inflation or the interest rate will have to raise up to about 18, 9 or 19% within the end of the year. They already have a high inflation rate at about, I think, about 15%. But I mean, if they predict that they will have to increase it up to 19%, that means they predict that the inflation is going to be very high, and that, as mentioned by someone in the chat, the real inflation is actually a lot higher than what the numbers we see out of official Russia is stating, which might be very manipulated.
Yeah, and I just can imagine it must be horrible to adjusting, like to jumping inflation numbers, jumping numbers for interest rates. This all does not make easier, and yeah, reading the headline, Russia's grow faster than all advanced economies, and then seeing what are the reason behind it, and this is just an artificial growth which Russia will not be able to sustain. It's yeah. The higher you climb, the harder the fall will be. So yeah, really interested how this will turn out. But sadly, as we know from history and about Russian society, and even like in books and literature, we know it's the Russians somehow are, they like it to suffer. It's a big nation of suffering, and only who suffers enough is a hard Russian, is a good Russian. So yeah, we will possibly see very much suffering on the Russian side, especially with the poor people. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Thierry, for correcting me. That's true. That they just raised it to 18%, and they expect it to go up to 19.4%.
Yeah, what you said is accurate, Erlend, but that she said that before they did it, and now they did it. That's basically
yeah. I was reading from the statement in July. So
we had another question real quick, just about this Airbus story. Actually didn't look super into it myself. I threw a link up for a news story that has a more like comprehensive explanation. I have no idea. I'm not a big aviation guy, especially not a civil aviation guy. The website is called aerotime.aero. So I don't know how reputable it is, but the information seems pretty like technical and serious. So an Airbus ACJ 320 Neo private jet worth around $110 million was spotted in Russia with a new Russian civil aircraft registration. It's a passenger aircraft. It's a business jet variant known as the corporate version. A news source, Russia's largest company in the international commercial property market, bought it. Ilyev is said to have accumulated a personal fortune in the region of $3 billion. I'm trying to see, like, how did he actually bypass the sanctions? Its provenance is complicated, to say the least, as its route has taken to end up in Russian hands. It rolled out of a factory in Hamburg in 2019. It was registered to a Malta-based company. It got an Azerbaijani registration. Here we go. It was registered on the Tajikistan register. Tajikistan mentioned not in war context meme. On June 16th, the aircraft was re-registered in Russia. And then it had new register. Oh, it was flown from Oman to Russia after that registration was changed. And then it was ferried to Moscow's airport. And there it was in the news when we heard an Airbus got to Russia somehow. So there you go. I mean, it sounds like probably that's how a lot of sanctioned things get to Russia, right? Like just a bunch of crazy shell games where you register it to 18 different countries where they're slowly less concerned about sanctions. You just keep re-registering it from a country to various country titles, and eventually it gets lost in the sauce, and an Airbus winds up in Russia. Anyway, I think that basically answers the question. So thanks for that.
But Bionade, did you have anything more on the economy?
Not really. I just going through the points here. Our dear friend Ben Sanders, and he basically, you need the people at the front, you need people at the factory, you need to cover extra consumption by people benefiting from the war, produce for export, recreate the stuff missing due to sanctions, and all the other things. And we heard that, Joseph, you mentioned it in the news, right? Migrant workers. I can imagine they made this classic, oh, we take up a couple of migrant workers, tell them, hey, you either go to the front line because your visa is over, you cannot work, or your work permission is not valid anymore. So either you go to the front line or you leave the country, and possibly they did the reasonable thing and went home. And you already have like 1,000 missing workers in the distribution center, and some part of Russia is not getting their bottled water. And what was it, Joseph?
Well, this is just a story I remember seeing on Twitter, just some like random tweets where people were like, the Russians don't even have any like food or water. They're making videos begging for food and water. And I was kind of like, that's weird, but it's Russia, whatever. And I just like dug into it a little bit when I was doing the news report. And so it turned out that like a grocery chain specifically relied like a lot on migrant labor to like keep their shelves.
I mean, they all do now, right? This is the thing. Yeah,
something happened where like in this specific case, like a raid, hit this store, and this store is in charge. It's like picture your local.
And we know these raids happen with a reason to try to conscript people, right? That's basically the two or three effects coming together, right? And even on one group. So even
all these like logistics warehouses for like grocery stores or like anything like electronics, whatever, like they all have like migrant laborers in Russia. So basically you raid one of those, you're gonna get 1,000 migrant workers, They know that.
And these are the migrant workers most likely you just imported to cover for your manpower shortages, because everyone is going for the military. And when you try also to conscript these people, these are the effects you see on civil society, and we can expect to see more and more and more. Because this is basically the fight which is happening in Russia right now between the civil and the military sector, and nobody's happy.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention some of the things that so we have more researchers in Tochnyi that are called Ben. I think this is Ben number 3, or number 2. I don't remember. And he's digging into a lot of information from Russian kind of back channels and some channels that are trying to do some investigative reporting from Russia. And on these sign-on bonuses, he found some information which indicates that the bonuses have grown 6.5 times compared to a year ago. And just wanted to mention that the sign-on bonuses are also different from each oblast. They recently, and I think many people saw this, they recently increased the sign-on bonus for Moscow, St. Petersburg, and Moscow Oblast, like a whole lot. And in Moscow, it's right now 1.9 million rubles. And this is kind of also a sign that they're not reaching their targets on recruitment, and they're trying to avoid at all costs to mobilize. And I'm not sure if these kind of bonuses is the thing that is going to have the most effect on the economy, but I think certainly the fact that so much of society is also working in the war industry in some way or form, where salaries also are higher than normal average salaries in the society, then this just stacks up on huge discrepancies in salary levels, which is driving inflations in certain areas more than others. But eventually the inflation is going to hit everywhere anyways. You can't artificially keep the inflation away from happening.
Yeah, and this is basically what you mentioned. It's not only that maybe the money will not make the biggest effect from the sign-up bonuses, but the sign-up bonuses are a big, you can see an indicator, right? How good is it running? And when you have to pay like 6.5 times higher sign-up bonuses than a year before, you can imagine what kind of sign-up bonuses you have to give, or what kind of salary you have to give in other jobs. So yeah, just to find a person who is like doing your logistics or some other important things. Yeah.
I'm sure they're going to find some more people with these increased bonuses, but at some point they're not going to work because some people are never going to go to the war, even if they get
But
insane
it's
amounts of money.
it's the point of the competition with the civil economy, right? Which is like really bringing the point home, how hard it will be to compete with the military. And we already saw the effect, right, with the oil industry, which has now to compete with the military industry with their salaries.
But they're trying to avoid forced
Mobilization. Yeah.
So someone in chat asked, like, is there anything preventing a provincial resident moving to Moscow and listing there to get the better bonus? So, like, as far as I understand, like, in Russia, you have a province that you are in your state identification documents. You are from a province, right? And the only way to get that changed would be like you would have to have a good reason to change your residence. Like I have a career in Moscow, and so I would like to go to the federal government and officially change my like residence to Moscow Oblast instead of wherever I came from. Otherwise, like in practice, it might be very different. You might go to Moscow and work even without official sanction from the government. But once you arrive there, if you need, federal services of any kind, as far as the federal government is concerned, you are from the region on your identification documents, unless you get them changed. So you can't just go to Moscow and like sign up for the better state bonus there. Because when you go and sign up on your documents, it'll say you're from this province, and they'll say, well, we're not going to pay you, and they'll probably refer you back to your own governor, right? Because every governor in the Russian Federation has like recruitment targets in their region, right? So it's kind of a different system than we think of in our system, of where like all the provinces are kind of interchangeable, and like it doesn't really matter where we're registered, and thing, except for very specific things anyway.
Yeah, I assume you need to have a physical place to live where you can register as well. And I'm not sure if you have to own it or rent it, but renting in Moscow is a lot more expensive than in every other place in Russia. So I guess the people who are interested in then getting those bonuses wouldn't be actually able to financially move to Moscow as well. So I think that's too difficult for them. And knowing Russia, I'm sure they will make it more difficult right now.
For sure. And like the reason in Moscow it's so high is like two very specific reasons. Number one, Putin raised the federal thing. Like Erlend was saying, there's two versions of this bonus. As I said, the governors all have their own recruitment targets, so they have good reason to give their own financial incentives to try to raise their own numbers so that they can report back to the federal government, doing good, boss. We're sending enough men to the meat grinder. But also, Putin has said, okay, I raised ours. I think that all the states should raise it to an equal amount to what I just raised it to. And we have to assume that he sat down with the governor of Moscow Oblast and said, hey, you're going to raise yours to that to be like a good example of this, right? Like, so that's one reason, is Putin said you need to raise it to this. And then number two, it's probably difficult to get the people in Moscow to, like Erlend was saying, people in Moscow and St. Petersburg are very comfortable. There's a reason in the Russian system you manage to get there. It's a very expensive cities to live. You're probably doing pretty decent in terms of like relative to other Russians. And it's probably pretty hard for them to meet their quotas in those two provinces for military recruitment. So they have to provide a pretty hefty financial incentive and try to get the numbers that they can, right?
Yep. And the fact that Moscow is now heavily recruiting means that they probably got higher targets for recruitment, which wasn't the case before. They tried to avoid at all costs recruiting in Moscow and St. Petersburg especially. Okay. I see there's also a question about Hungary, and I've been thinking about this. I've been reading a little bit, but couldn't really find anything that points towards an imminent exclusion of Hungary or anything like this. Schengen is not just EU, so Norway, Iceland, Switzerland is also a member of Schengen, and I'm not certain where the decisions are being made, but I'm quite sure that means we are also included in those decision-making processes. And absolutely, this new stuff from Hungary is not it might not be a huge problem, because if Russia wants to get people in here that are, for their intelligence service or for I don't know, disrupting something, they can do that. It's not that difficult for Russians to get a visa to Schengen. It's just now there's no check if they go through Hungary. So I don't think anything will happen, mainly because everyone knows that if Russia wants to get illegals or people that are have some sort of mission to perform certain illegal activities, they will get them here, unfortunately. So I don't know how the process is.
Yeah, I think, like, I'm certainly no expert on European politics. I'm probably dumb even just trying to attempt to answer this. But it seems to me like when dealing with Hungary in the past, it seems like most of the incentives to get Hungary to be a responsible actor, that's the euphemism I'm going to use for get Hungary to stop being like this, is financial, right? Hungary is facing a very severe economic downturn and crisis because of horrible mismanagement for the past decade or so. And as a result, they just need money. They need that sweet EU money. And the EU can sort of hold it back and say, you guys got to do X, Y, and Z. Otherwise, you don't get any money. And in the past, that's gotten Hungary to sort of play ball. And it seems like we've entered a new phase of, because Ukraine has cut off Hungary's oil from Russia through the pipeline, and they made no, even though it is a war going on between these two countries, and Hungary was relying on Ukraine being nice enough to let Russia send their oil through the country they're at war with to get there. They've made no alternative plans since the war started. They're freaking out basically, and they're sort of making a move here to try to get the EU to do something, and the EU now has to Hungary has shifted the negotiations a bit because they're freaked out about this. And now the EU needs to bring it back into equilibrium with various financial incentives and carrots and sticks, as it were, to get Hungary back to where they're playing ball. And I think probably this oil issue is pretty serious for them. So it's going to come down to that. We're probably going to hear Ukraine has reached some sort of agreement with Hungary about the oil, and then we'll hear something about how they've stopped blocking the aid, and they've maybe will do something to fix this Schengen situation. But I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, well, Thierry mentioned something that is very important, that the other countries, all the countries in Schengen, can at any moment in time impose border checks, and this was done also during COVID. There were some countries who were really upset about that, but it shows that it was completely possible to introduce border checks, even if you're a member of Schengen. So I guess the way to pressure Hungary would be to get all the countries around Hungary to impose border controls, which would really hamper things for Hungary. It would be an absolute disaster for them. We don't really need to do much more than that. It would really, so they don't need to be excluded from the Schengen. It just practically needs to happen.
Yeah, like I'm not trying to undersell the significance of this, but to me, it seems like Hungary is kind of trying to make as much noise as they can, blocking this aid, doing this agreement with Russia. Like they're saying, if you guys don't fix our terrible economy, we're going to make some noise. But maybe I'm not the best analyst, and you shouldn't listen to me.
But hey, Ukraine got some new toys, and we're lucky to have Colby with us. So I know there was a question way earlier up in the chat, and I think I want to ask it. Yeah, there it is. From Rodoidifi. F-16 questions. Are there places along the front line or over the Black Sea where F-16s have unique opportunities for working on enemy assets due to local circumstances, a lack of air defense, etc.? So basically, the question is if Ukraine will be able to push F-16s forward, employ some weapons that are probably better used with F-16s, like the HARM missiles. Maybe they're getting some cruise missiles that we don't know of, things of that sort. And I guess also, what do you think the prospects are that Ukraine will be able to use them to push back Russian light bombers dropping these Cub bombs, Colby?
On the latter question, zero chance that will be happening. That's just completely not in the cards at all. On the first question, I mean, the Ukrainian Air Force is already doing limited sorties kind of closer to the front line. So in theory, F-16s can do the same thing and perform those missions a little bit better because they already have all the integrations with these weapons done. So they'll work a lot better than they will with these ad hoc integrations that have been done with the MiGs and the Sukhois. But I wouldn't expect any of this in the short term. We've heard signals from the Ukrainians that the intention right now is just to use them for defensive counter-air, which is the right decision. Use them to hunt down Shaheds and Russian cruise missiles, because the worst possible thing that Ukraine could do is get too aggressive with these right now and then have them get shot down at the front line, because that would be a huge propaganda coup for the Russians. So I don't anticipate that we're going to see a lot of F-16 action anywhere close to the front line. That'd be a huge mistake. Ukraine needs to get comfortable operating these in the combat environment. So running DCA missions is the right thing to do until more F-16s are delivered to Ukraine. They can build up the fleet some more. Then they'll have more of an opportunity to get them being used more in an offensive role. But even then, we're still talking about just using some of the weapons they already have: HARM, JDAM-ER, small diameter bomb. We still don't have any indication that they're going to get any sort of real standoff weapons, which are very essential because Ukraine's running out of Storm Shadow and Scalp-PG cruise missiles. So it's really imperative that the United States at least get them SLAM-ER, and ideally there's approximately 160 JASSM baseline Alpha missiles that have expired in the U.S. Air Force inventory that can and should be given to Ukraine, because otherwise they would just be demilitarized at some point down the road. So that's still very, very, very important. But there's no indication that has happened yet. And of course, there's no indication that these aircraft have or will get upgraded radars to APG-68, which would be useful and give them more of an opportunity to do air-to-air engagements. Even still, they'd be at a disadvantage there. But the current radars are very bad, really. The APG-66s they have are not good at all compared to what the Russians have. So F-16s would be going into a significant disadvantage against Russian fixed-wing aviation without those upgrades, but there's no indication that's going to happen. So they're fairly limited in what they can do with them. Doesn't mean that they're not useful. They are useful, but they're limited in what they can do right now, given the circumstances in which we've equipped them and how long it's taken to get them to Ukrainians.
Yeah, I think also many people miss the fact that the way of operating an air force is completely different from the old Soviet doctrine to the more Western approach, where pilots have a lot more individual responsibility while they're in the air. I'm not sure, but I would assume and I hope that these pilots and these aircraft will be operated according to doctrine from NATO, and not with trying to integrate them somehow into the way that Ukrainians have been operating their Soviet era aircraft.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think this is definitely something that John could speak on more, but I think to the extent that obviously there's still very pervasive problems within the Ukrainian armed forces with just legacy command and control and legacy doctrine. And this has certainly been vastly more problematic under the current leadership of Syrskyi, who's very much of that old Soviet mindset. I think that the Ukrainian Air Force is probably less affected by this than the army is and the overall armed forces. But I mean, the biggest limiting factor, as I said, is it's not anything doctrinal within Ukrainian armed forces. It's really just the Russians have a massive advantage both in fixed-wing aviation and ground-based air defenses. So those are the two things that are really limiting their ability to use aircraft more, more aggressively. Is that just if they did, they would all be shot down. It's not a doctrinal problem. So they're making as good a use out of their air assets as they possibly can. I think they've actually done a pretty good job, all things considered. With the ad hoc integrations that we've been able to work out with them. So that's all good. The problem, as I said, is that we just took so long to get them F-16s, right? There was some desire to do this for a long time, but President Biden just did not want to approve the third-party transfer requests. So it's taken a long time to get them there. And the training, obviously the training that they have received in the United States and Denmark and other places, we're going to be training them to according to our own tactics, because they're Western jets. So their success depends on using them the way that they've been designed to be used, right? The flying part, just piloting the aircraft, that is easy compared to all of the tactics that you have to understand. What is the correct way to employ all the different weapon systems? Because that's a lot more complicated than some people might think. And really, ideally, they would have spent longer training, because just the more they train, the more comfortable they're going to be, the less margin for error they have now going into a combat situation where there's going to be people shooting back at you. And again, that's why I think we shouldn't expect to see a lot of offensive operations, because they're just so much more risky. So you want them to get comfortable just using the aircraft in a combat setting, not in as high of a risk setting as flying offensive operations. So defensive counter-air operations, I think, is going to be the bread and butter for them for now. And again, they have very few aircraft, so the loss of one would be really, really bad. So don't anticipate anything big happening over the front lines.
Yeah. So TD, I think you actually answered this question, but he asks which kind of radar equips these F-16s, and there's no information that they got any upgrades.
Yeah, they're still using the APG-66, and the 83 is almost certainly off the table. They're not going to get those. There's a long list of customers who want those either for upgrade kits or they need to be put into new build Block 70 F-16. So that's not going to happen. The 68s, should be very possible between the United States and other customers who may have those available, because they're getting pulled out of old aircraft for upgrade to APG-83. There should be 68s available, and but there's no indication that that's happened, and that's just a massive failing on the part of the United States and other countries, that they haven't been able to get that done.
Colby, if I could ask, I've seen, so we have two things now. We have video of them in flight, and then we have video of Zelensky at Ukrainian Air Force Day doing the speech here. And we see, as we've seen on screen a few times, like the beautiful shot of the Ukrainian F-16 with the Ukrainian trident on the tail. So I've seen all kinds of like OSINT hot takes on like stuff we see on the aircraft meaning things. Like, can we see anything visually on these I'll put it this way. I've heard everything from these things are top of the line to these things are junk to these are fake like demonstration aircraft. So like, I don't know, is there anything we can glean from the visual confirmation we've gotten so far?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much what we expected. We've got I think these first ones are Danish. That's been established. But some of the ones on the ground as well, the one that's on the screen right now with the kind of the gold colored cockpit, there was some suggestion that might actually be a very old Alpha from the United States that's going to be used just as a ground trainer or a decoy. So there's still some questions that are not 100% sorted out, I think. But some of these aircraft have definitely been conclusively identified as being from the Danish Air Force. But in terms of what they have, I mean, it's pretty much what we expected. We can see that there's an older model Sidewinder on them. There's a captive air training missile AIM-120 AMRAAM on it as well. There's a pod there, which John's been tweeting about. It's what's it called? The pylon on Station 3 is ESIPS Plus, if I'm saying that how it's supposed to be said, which has it's got a missile launch detection system on it, and then there's an electronic warfare or countermeasures module on it as well. So we knew that they were going to be getting some pods. So there's a pod there, and then we're speculating that there should be some other pods, hopefully, that are in the cards that they might get, like harm targeting system. I mean, it would be a disaster if they didn't get sniper. There's really no reason they shouldn't, because the Dutch operate sniper pods with their F-16s. So we expect that those are going to get handed over with the Dutch F-16. So they should have targeting pods. But again, we're still lacking here in terms of munitions. There's a lot of things that could and should be given. The radar, aside from the radars needing to be upgraded, but as I said, SLAM-ER, JASSM baseline, even things like JSOW, there's a lot being left on the table right now that there's not really any indication that they will receive. And then, John's tweet here about APKWS as well. We already know Ukraine's already operating APKWS. And this is something like we need to get them a lot more of this, because this is the most cost-effective system for them to go Shahed hunting with. Quite cost-effective. You can put a lot of these on an F-16. So that plus a targeting pod like Sniper will make the F-16s very effective at hunting down the Shaheds. So if the F-16s can really take care of a lot of the Shaheds, that just frees up, other ground-based air defense resources to focus on the more stressing threats like the cruise missiles. So, there's good news with F-16s arriving, but we have to be cognizant not to oversell things and oversell the impact, and not understate it either. I mean, just as you said, like it's either one end of the spectrum or the other, right? There's a lot of people out there with just very hot takes that are either dooming, or it's pure hopium, wish casting. And as usual, the truth typically lies somewhere in the middle in most cases.
But yeah, these APKWS are basically laser guided rockets, right? So
it's the 70 millimeter Hydra rocket that's got a guidance kit on it, a
Yeah.
precision guidance kit. So it's very versatile weapon system. We've seen you can launch these from the ground in a surface-to-air role. You can launch them air-to-air. They can be launched air-to-ground as well. So very versatile weapon. Ukraine's already got them. So hopefully we see these being equipped to the F-16s along with the targeting pods, and that'll be a really potent defense against the Shaheds and other unmanned aerial system or one-way attack unmanned aerial systems.
We have any other stuff we want to talk about with the F-16s? I mean, it's great news. So like Colby said, I think it's pretty clear that they have a very specific purpose here, and that's to, you know, defend the airspace and sort of replace Ukraine's existing airframes, which, you know, are seeing the end of their lifespan. And you know, I think as long as we don't expect them to do more than that, I think we're going to see good results, right? Is that kind of the takeaway?
Yeah, yeah.
So there is a question if Ukraine could potentially upgrade the radars with like non-official parts, I guess, from third parties. There are F-16s being decommissioned around in various countries, and is it possible, even technically, that Ukraine would be able to upgrade these radars with parts from other countries?
Yeah, I mean, if they are the standard radars, I'm not aware off the top of my head of any F-16s anywhere that have been equipped with like really out of the box radars. The Israelis typically do a lot of work to their own aircraft, but I mean, the Israelis are, you know, everything they are doing is pretty, you know, compatible with the base technology. It's nothing too wacky. So, I mean, the whole point of getting Ukraine F-16s is standardization and sustainment, because it is not possible for us here in the West to sustain Ukraine's legacy Soviet airframes indefinitely, because these are not aircraft that we ourselves operated, with the exception of basically, you know, some of the former East Bloc countries. So they've already gotten a lot of, you know, what we were able to source to help them sustain their legacy aircraft. So, you know, even in Russia, like the Russians aren't producing spare parts for their, you know, a lot of their oldest aircraft, right? They're just focusing on newer models. So there's very limited ability for us to sustain the older stuff. So the whole point behind this exercise is we need to get Ukraine aircraft that we have a capacity to produce spare parts for and help them sustain. So if we're going to go out and try and find some other radar that is not standard to the F-16, was never integrated with the F-16, that's a huge undertaking to get that integration done, even if it's possible or not. And it may not be, because you have size constraints, you have weight constraints, and you have power constraints for the radar in that nose, right? And you know, there were questions about whether even you could upgrade the radar even further on these older model aircrafts, whether the nose was big enough, whether it could handle the weight, whether it could handle the power. And we established that it is possible, should be possible to be able to do both 68 and 83. So it could be done, but the question is, like, is there political willingness to source the radars, and is there capacity to actually do the work? Because it's not something that you can just go and swap out in a day in the field, right? Like, radars are very sensitive technologies, very sensitive equipment. So this is something that has to be done in a factory, basically, where the aircraft has to go in, got to remove the old aircraft, uninstall the old radar, install the new radar. It's not a simple and easy, quick process. So this is why you heard John and I saying like a year ago that this is something that we need to figure out right now, because it's going to take time to get that done. So the solution here is we source them the APG-68s, or we don't really do anything. I don't see, there's nothing else that is more likely, more feasible than that. That's the option on the table.
Any other questions for chat on F-16s, Erlend?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, I guess I just did want to. Well, we got Colby here. Colby, you write for a publication called The Insider. It's a great publication. There are a lot of very prestigious people who write for it. Michael Weiss, Christo Grozev, many others. I think at this point, I want to say they've broken some of the stories about like Russian intelligence agents and stuff on The Insider, right? So I mean, the Insider itself, I would say, is credited with like a lot of very important stories about what's going on with Russian intelligence services in Europe and elsewhere. So yeah, I'm just curious, like, how are things going with your publication career at The Insider, and if there's any new articles you want to talk about, I think that'd be good. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. Thanks to Erlend for throwing it up there on the screen. Yes, The Insider does a lot of very good investigative work. That's very much sort of the crown jewel, I guess, of the publication is all the great work that Michael and Christo and others do on investigating Russian intelligence operations in Europe and elsewhere. I'm just a meager guy with hot takes in the opinion section, but I'm in good company there. A lot of esteemed people writing opinion for the Insider as well, and they come to me and ask me to write different stuff, usually about Ukraine, the war that's happening. So latest, I mean, usually I'm writing about fairly similar stuff. Missiles are typically involved in some capacity. So in fact, I don't know if I've written a piece so far that hasn't involved missiles in some way. So it's not nothing groundbreaking, and just making the point here that Ukraine has very significant air defense needs. Investing in Ukraine's air defenses is not really a viable strategy to overcome the threat that they're facing from Russia, because Russia just has a lot more missiles than we can get them interceptors to destroy before they impact a hospital or a school, right? So it's very important that Ukraine has counterstrike ability. So coming back to the F-16 conversation, although those help with defending Ukrainian airspace against Russian missiles, really Ukraine needs to be able to hit back, right? So it's titled Shoot the Archer, Not the Arrow. We want to destroy Russian aircraft on the tarmac. We want to destroy Russian logistics on the ground. We want to destroy Russian missile tells on the ground. That's all stuff that needs to happen if Ukraine's going to kind of even the playing field here. So make the case that Ukraine just needs to be given more missiles, and we need the Biden administration to allow Ukraine to use those missiles, because right now they are prohibiting Ukraine from doing that. So it's again nothing that we haven't talked about before, but they wanted me to write about this, so I did. So that's the piece basically.
Yeah, there's a lot of good information about air defense systems, how they work. And yeah, I think Colby made a good, important case that I think is pretty, like, I would say that's the broad consensus among the, I guess, air defense community, for lack of a better term, is like, you can't just sit there and like defend your airspace when your adversary has a lot of missiles and they're just like launching them at you at their leisure. Like, at some point you have to strike back in order to effectively counter the threat. Like, it's a lot harder to block every punch than to like eliminate the threat. At a certain point, you get overwhelmed if you just try to eliminate the symptom rather than the cause, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
so
I'm just showing the pictures of the airbase that was hit, and this was presumably done with Ukrainian drones. And
yes, this was a UAS attack. So Ukraine would be able to do a lot more of these and be much more effective if they could do this with missiles, with ATACMS, with Storm Shadow, with JASSM, with Slam-ER. Drones are not actually really all that cost effective, because it takes a lot more drones to achieve the same effects on target, because drones are just a lot easier to intercept. So even though they're cheaper, they're not actually more cost effective. JASSM is by far the most cost-effective long-range strike weapon that's ever been devised. Really, the capability that you're getting at the price point, it's unrivaled.
Yeah, but it seems like this, at least there's some advancement in the success rate, or the actual, like, the difficulty rate of the missions that they send these drones on. Seems to be at least advancing somewhat, but I totally agree there. If they send up 70 drones and only a couple make it, it's not very cost effective in the long run.
No, I mean, I would say this is actually one of the more impressive attacks that we've seen in a while. I mean, if you look at the time lapse there of the ammunition storage and how nothing is left of it, usually we're not seeing their attacks be this effective, right? Like before, the Ukrainians claimed that they had struck the Russian airbase all the way up in Murmansk, right up there near or in Karelia. Yeah. And the satellite images that came back were pretty inconclusive. They didn't appear to show much of any damage that we could discern. So a lot of these Ukrainian strikes, even when the Ukrainians say that they were effective, turn out to be not so effective. So there have been a number of notable instances where they have been successful in destroying some stuff on the ground, but a lot of them don't, right? And there's also there's selection and confirmation bias here, right? Like if an attack is not successful, we might not hear really anything about it other than perhaps a brief statement from TASS saying air defense was active and, we destroyed all incoming threats, which the Russians are saying that all the time. So it's even with that, it's pretty much impossible to discern like what was the magnitude of the attempted raid that was conducted and how successful were the Russians in defending it. So there's very much confirmation and selection bias at play here, where we only really hear about the really successful ones, and it kind of gives people a false illusion of how successful Ukraine is with their drone attacks. And we have to be like crystal clear here that Ukraine is resorting to this out of desperation because they just don't have the missiles they need to be effective. Like if they had no shortage of missiles, they wouldn't be using drones. They would be using the missiles because the missiles are just vastly more effective. So Ukraine has to resort to this because they haven't been able to mature their own indigenous designs to the point where they are production ready and capable enough. This is something that John was talking about yesterday on Twitter. We were doing a space with Jeff and Zach. There's a lot of issues with Neptune. It's just fundamentally not a very good missile. It was a political project fundamentally. So it's very much on us to get them the missiles they need. It's not going to come out of their own industry. There's just way too many problems there to resolve, really.
Also, too, in my news reports, I hear a lot of cases where it's the same facility being hit. To my recollection, at least 4 times, I can think of one facility that's been hit. So, I mean, that would indicate, right? You got to keep trying and trying to achieve a strike on a target. So, yeah. But they did mention, Colby, that Romania is going to be helping to develop Neptune a bit with Ukraine. I don't know if that's piqued your interest.
Yeah, doubts. John said that he has doubts about that. I have no reason to disagree with that conclusion. I mean, Romania doesn't have its own domestic cruise missile industry, so I'm not sure how much technical assistance they would be able to provide them. Industrial capacity, yes, but
I see what you're saying, though, that It sounds like Romania is a little freaked out by what's going on. They want a little bit more security in the Black Sea. They're probably going to pay Ukraine to help develop the Neptune missile and maybe buy it. Like they're relying on Ukraine to do the missile part. Like they're going to help out, but maybe monetarily or some other way.
Yeah, I think it very well may be the case that they want to help. I'm just I'm not sure what they can practically do to help the Ukrainians with that specifically. Certainly, I mean, Romania has done an awful lot for Ukraine, magnitudes which are unfathomable to most, actually, and that'll become revealed at some point in time down in the future. But on this specifically, I'm not sure that people should not get their hopes up, really.
Yeah. They said specifically too, this is like about after the war, not about like helping them develop it for the war.
Oh, okay. I totally missed that detail as well. So, I mean, there you go. That's just an example of, people, as usual, misconstruing what's actually being said, because that's a detail that I didn't even see. So if that's the case, then that just shows you, again, like, people need to be very careful about what what information they are believing and trusting on the internet, because more often than not, you have people either maliciously or just because they're not careful in how they talk about things, they just misconstrue what was reported by somebody else, and we're playing broken telephone here, or one person citing another person who's citing another person, and then you go back to the original source and you said, well, this is not what they said at all, and the guy who I saw this from said something totally different. So that's just a lesson to people that primary sources are very good and important. Always try and find primary sources.
I think to a lot of people, right? I mean, Zelensky said something a bit vague and mysterious. He said something to the effect of like, oh, Ukraine's working on missiles. Like, you're going to hear news from us about missiles soon. So I think anytime anything related to missiles comes out, everyone's like, that must be the thing that he's talking, right? So I think it's really like made everyone kind of hyper reactive to any missile news, but maybe I'm mistaken. Do we have any questions from chat about anything in general, Erlend, or should we start wrapping things up?
I see that there's some discussion going on there, but I don't see any questions directed for us. But yeah, I let's see if I find a picture. So there's an interesting like drone development that I thought I'd bring up. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but there was this enormous drone that was captured, basically shot down by the Russians. There it is. And the drone itself isn't the interesting part, except the fact that it's very, very large. But there were some interesting munitions on it, and I've been digging around to find out what it was, and through a Ukrainian contact, he told me that it's based on a BK, or no, it's based on an RK 30F anti-armor missile. So it's an anti-tank missile that is intended for the RK3 Corsa missile platform. At least that's some of the parts are deriving from that. But this designation BK30F is not something that is listed anywhere publicly. It's presumably something new, so it might be from the same producer. And also it's notable that the rocket motor is not present there. So it seems like the same company that made this anti-tank missile, which is a laser-guided anti-tank missile, have created a munition which is specialized for dropping from drones. That is at least the indication, but no official confirmation or anything like that.
But so it doesn't have a motor?
No, so it derives from a missile. I think this is a glide munition. There's no motor there.
So you get real high and drop it, and then it guides, the laser guides it down. Okay.
Yeah. And that's really interesting because dropping munitions from really, really high up is difficult. The quadcopters are dropping very precise drops, but not from very high up. So, I mean, this could actually revolutionize a bit drone drops kind of operations. what I don't understand is then if it's laser guided, why on earth they're using a quadcopter and not a
Right.
fixed wing aircraft?
But
But
yeah, that's the kind of
I
thing you
just
would do like a
think
Bayraktar use, right? Like normally.
I mean, there
Well-
are several VTOL platforms with fixed wings that could be suitable for this, or designs that easily the Ukrainians could make themselves as well. The thing about a fixed wing aircraft is that you can keep it up for a lot longer and it can go a lot higher, which means it's difficult to shoot down.
Right.
I asked my Ukrainian contact, and he said he didn't know this drone. He had never seen it before, and he's a drone pilot. And he said, yeah, this thing is easy to shoot down because it's so large. They're very slow in the air. You can't really maneuver it. So these are easy to shoot down.
Yeah, like as far as I understand, right? Like once you get a munition that fancy, you're gonna want to have some like you want to invest in a fixed wing drone delivery system, right?
Yeah.
Because like the quadcopters, one advantage is they're cheap. Like they have a lot of disadvantages, like bad weather, like like obviously fixed wing are affected by the weather, but like these little quadcopters are a lot more affected. As you said, they're super vulnerable. Like there's just a lot of reasons you would, if you're going to get something that fancy as far as your munition, why you would want a fixed wing drone. So it is interesting that they would use a quadcopter, but
well, we don't know. Maybe this just was a test of the platform, and what they had available was that large drone. So we'll see. I do think it's interesting. This one is definitely a little bit of a different kind of configuration. It has a preformed fragmentation sleeve around the explosive part, and my contact said that this missile has normally the missile that this is based upon has around 50 millimeter of penetration. So it seems like this could be kind of a combination of an anti-armor and also personnel kind of munition, which is the most advanced munition that we have seen from drones until now, at least.
The thing with fixed wing drones is that they're even bigger and they're easier to spot both visibly and to radar, right? So something like a Bayraktar, for example, Ukraine isn't using those over the front line anymore because Russian GVAD is just going to down them instantly. So use a bigger platform, it's just more likely to be shot down. The advantage of the small quadcopters is that even though they're super vulnerable to electronic warfare, if there isn't super prevalent EW in the area, they're just a lot harder to see. So there's less of a risk to ground-based air defenses. So there's trade-offs with everything, right? And as you said, this might be not. They may not be intending to use this, serially with quadcopters. This might be even a one-off, right? Like there's no indication that this is something that they're going to be serially producing and using a lot of. It might be just sort of a let's see how this thing works, and if it's good, then maybe we can go with it, and if it doesn't, then back to the drawing board.
Yeah, I think that's what we've seen here. But yeah, I mean, Ukraine does fly fixed-wing aircraft or drones all the time over the Russian held territories, but they are very considerably smaller than the Bayraktar, right? So I think there's
like with the Shark, right? That's one of the main reconnaissance ones that they use. So I mean, it's kind of hard to see how big this thing actually is, but it looks like it's relatively big and heavy. So I don't know what the payload requirement would be, and then that's going to limit what your options are to carry it.
Yeah, I just want to say the reason I brought up Bayraktars is it's the smallest, cheapest drone I can think of that I know I've heard a laser guided munition is used on. So if you guys have a smaller example than that, then maybe that would be a better example. But that's why I brought it up. So sorry.
Well, yeah, that's totally correct. But it's military grade kind of stuff, and I think there is a middle way around between like this kind of enormous quadcopter and or between maybe a better analogy, but between a Shark drone and a Bayraktar, right? I think there's somewhere around there where it's not something the Russians are going to shoot down either because they won't be able to see it or because you would just assume that this thing is probably a surveillance drone. And I mean, we've seen many videos of the Russians trying to shoot down surveillance drones with Strela and even Buk, and the missile just zooms past it because it doesn't see it. So I mean, I think there's room for this kind of platform to work. And then before we stop, I wanted to show this one from that Gik geolocated, which I think is one of the most impressive drone strikes I've seen. It's basically a drone carpet bombing I think he said it was an SPG. What did he say? Yeah, some sort of SPG, but it's camouflage, so it's not possible to see which one. But this is a very impressive drone strike.
How many bombs was that? 6.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 6.
Wowzers.
Yep. There's a lot of interesting things happening at the drone development stuff. I mean, a lot of the most positive news is that we see a lot more of specially made, like purposely made munitions that are safer to operate and also a lot more effective on target. There was also an UGV, which apparently, I haven't seen a video or anything, I just saw a report, which the Ukrainians created some special type of what they call a hydrogen bomb. I don't know what that means. I don't think it's a nuclear device. I think
Of course.
I think it's actually some sort of vacuum bomb that they made. Yeah, they're doing a lot of things with drones now, and it's interesting to monitor and follow. And I think the drones are going to be even more effective than they've been. And unfortunately, that means the Russians are going to copy it, and we're going to see the same things happening towards the Ukrainians.
Yeah, I mean, definitely in our data, we're seeing the scale go up exponentially in terms of drone usage. And then, well, I should say Daniela and Andrew's data, not ours really, but, you know, we definitely see that trend. I would say the size of the drones are getting bigger. I don't think that's a controversial statement. Like every time I'm talking about a new model Ukraine is releasing, it's like a bigger version of a previous one, basically. And you know, we're seeing the Baba Yaga seem to get bigger and carry more crazy things. So, and then as you said, we're seeing more specialization in like munitions and drone types. So yeah, it's definitely, I would say, the area with the most innovation in the war right now.
Yeah, and also one of the things that we see is that a lot more of the losses are from drones. So vehicle losses, especially. Like, I don't know if it's possible to see even here. I'll try and zoom. It doesn't work. Yeah, but it's like drone. It's insane amount of drones. And we've also seen reports from the Ukrainians stating that right now it's more, they're taking more casualties to drones than our artillery. I'm not sure if that's correct for the whole front line, but certainly it is for some parts.
Yeah.
Erlend, right click on the image, open in another tab, and then you can zoom in the image itself.
Germinate to Ukraine is always like our boomer advisor when me and Erlend don't know what to do. He's like, go to this website.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but you see here like the bunch of different equipment from one of the updates from Andrew, and you just see it. It's just drone. So it's not always the case, but most of the time it's a vast majority of drones making the most of the damage. And also from the Russians, right? So
you know, I think we do our best to keep our eye on it. We should probably do even more systematic analysis of the drone stuff, but I don't know. It takes a lot of like technical knowledge, and it's changing so rapidly. And honestly, there's like there's a lot. The Ukrainians are cooking, man, and we don't necessarily want to give away some of their secret recipes, as it were. So it's a little bit difficult to get really, really in depth with it, you know. But it's definitely, I think, an area of great interest for us. It's something, you know, Daniela focuses on pretty exclusively, and like, I don't know. I think we're always on the lookout for more like interesting drone stuff for sure.
Yeah, Tiri mentioned something kind of interesting. It's true that the most of the footage that Andrew is analyzing is from drone, but we've seen a shift, even though like that's always been the method that Andrew has used, and even in his data we've seen a massive shift. But yeah, there is obviously other things going on which we don't see. So that's true.
Yeah, there's definitely a sample bias where drones have always been the majority, but as Erlend said, they're even more the majority than they were when this all started.
No, what I mean is that the drone footage has been the main way of analysis for Andrew and all the people helping him now. And even in that sample, it used to be a lot more artillery causing most of the damage. So yeah, I guess that means that the amount of damage caused by artillery was even larger before, because we didn't see everything, and now the drones are taking over completely in what we see, but it didn't used to be like that. So it's still the same sample, even though we rely completely on what the Ukrainians are releasing of footage, of course.
Well, I mean, with the nature of the war as it is right now, drones, whether it's an FPV drone or it's, you know, one of these reconnaissance drones that's surveying for other systems like indirect fire from artillery, that's really the only way that you're able to record what's going on the enemy's lines, because the fighting is so static, right? So yeah, you can see some stuff from you know, GoPros on soldiers on the ground, but a lot of the available information is it's coming from drones that are recording from above, right? Like earlier in the war, when things were way more mobile, there was more opportunity to get data just coming from the ground. But if you want to record Russian losses, right, if they launch an attack, like it's probably being surveilled from above, right? If you know, somebody's got a GoPro on the ground, you're not going to see as much from that point of view, right? So if the suggestion is that the sample is being skewed because something's being excluded, I don't know that something is being excluded. Is there, you know, what's the alternative source of information that's being excluded in favor of only looking at drone footage? You're just not going to see as much from the ground, right? Because the front lines are so static, and there's not an opportunity to go take enemy positions and record what their vehicle losses are.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just drone footage. There's also a lot of footage that is from body cameras or helmet cameras, or even vehicle mounted cameras. But most of the recorded like losses from that that kind of footage is some, you know, basically old losses. Someone drives down a road and you see losses from a geolocated location which you didn't see before. So then they're added to the database, but then you don't necessarily know exactly what caused it. They don't end up with a designation of you know what happened. So yeah, there is a sample bias, but the sample bias is basically what is being released. It's not exclusively drone footage that is being analyzed.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting note. I mean, we don't really know everything, but from what we can see, the drones are doing way more damage now than they did just a couple of months ago, and I don't see any reason for that to change drastically.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think we'll do our best to keep everyone appraised on it. So yeah, I think we'll probably start wrapping up. Erlend, does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in this week. We broadcast every week at 2100 Kyiv time. So yeah, please tune in every week. Please do like and subscribe to Tochnyi. We do broadcast every week, but also we sometimes have other things going on. So if you subscribe and like and everything like that, then YouTube will let you know what we're up to. So yeah, we appreciate everyone tuning in, everyone's support. Yeah, so thanks to our panel for coming in and discussing all of the major events going on this week. And thanks to our audience. And yeah, Slava Ukraini.
Heroям слава.